Okay, we are recording. Simon Price, how are you?
Hello, I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for
Good,
having me
good,
on.
good. I take it that's home where you are. Is that jazzy wallpaper or is that a legit record collection?
It's a legit record collection. Yeah, it's
It's
the cliched backdrop for any music journalist. Either that or books. Yeah.
yeah. Wonderful, wonderful. Look, Simon, I always start the podcast the same way, and I ask guests to tell me the song that they regard as having the greatest ever intro, please.
Yeah, the one I've chosen, and I've got it here to hand. It's from Nevermind the Bollocks by the Sex Pistols, and it is Bodies. And I was too young for punk. I was sort of 10 or 11 when it was not even that. I was sort of 8 or 9 when it was all kicking off. And it seems a million years ago to me by the time I was actually getting into youth culture. I remember there were these Sex Pistols records in the window of the local charity shop, which you shouldn't put records in a window anyway, but they were the sleeves had kind of faded in the sun, which made it seem even longer ago. I was a bit of a late convert to actual punk. Um, but I just think, well, first of all, I think the Sex Pistols are the greatest punk band. It may be obvious and really on the nose to choose them, but people get really kind of sniffy about the Pistols. They say, "Oh, they're a boy band, or they're manufactured, and all that." Or people start going on about Johnny Rotten advertising Country Life butter. I mean, who cares? They were the one because they absolutely ruffled feathers and really challenged and upset the establishment. They terrified people. They were seen as a genuine threat to the moral fabric of the country. And I think if you're going to be that kind of band, you've really got to go for the big targets, which in their case, the monarchy itself. Um, but Bodies is one of their more complex songs. It's vile for a start. It's a horrible, horrible lyric. It's a fucked up lyric. It's about someone who's had an abortion, and uh, Johnny Rotten is kind of unleashing all these kind of not completely processed thoughts because he was raised a Catholic, and I think quite in quite a sort of draconian, strict form of Catholicism, and that can really mess with your mind. And a lot of that sort of found its voice later on Public Image Limited records. But so it's got this kind of moralistic judgment of somebody who's had an abortion, um, and apparently, because I've interviewed Lydon, and apparently it's kind of based on a true story of a woman who was kind of in the Pistols orbit, who knocked on the door one day, um, clutching a plastic bag with the aborted fetus in it, and um, obviously this filled them with disgust. She's obviously a really sort of disturbed person, and that found its way into the song. And some could say the song's misogynistic or it's some kind of pro-life rant. I don't think it's any of that. I think it's just horror and disgust and confusion pouring out. And I liken it to Too Much Too Young by the Specials. That's another song that's actually kind of horrible, kind of vile, but thrilling at the same time. And Bodies is a thrilling record. The intro, it's got a fake intro. It's got two intros. It's got this sort of bit of guitar at the start from Steve Jones, who I think is a really underrated guitarist anyway, and he's kind of my favorite Sex Pistol. Um, he's so funny on the Bill Grundy instant where he's going, "What a fucking rotter, you dirty," he's the one more than
That
anyone
never
who
gets boring, that clip,
no
does it?
he's the one more than anyone who's really given it to Bill Grundy. Um, of course, there's all this talk that he didn't really play the guitar on the album, blah blah blah. But whatever, whoever, it's that first little bit of guitar. It sounds like some kind of monstrous machine that's gearing up. But while it's gearing up, it's kind of coming apart, and the parts and the levers are spinning in odd directions, and then it just sort of stops, and then it kicks in. She was a girl from Birmingham, and it's just so it sort of picks up pace immediately, and it's just got you by the throat. And oh, yeah, it's so exciting. And partly what makes it exciting is that the subject matter is so dark, and you know that what's to come is just horrible. Um, I remember Suede, who are one of my favorite bands. In fact, I think Suede are basically the best band in the world right now. They genuinely are. But Suede used to use Bodies as their walk-on music. And I just remember being at Suede gigs and that coming on and just getting this shiver of something great is about to happen because we're hearing Bodies by the Pistols. So yeah,
Can we
I
talk about Suede for a moment,
mm,
Simon? Because at the age that I am, you know, was lucky to see Suede in those sort of, I say the early gigs, the gigs when the furore around them was starting to build,
yeah, we
and
were probably at some of the same gigs, I would imagine.
I'm
Yeah.
sure, and it felt unlike any other band I'd sort of been to see at that point. It felt that something exciting was really happening at these early Suede gigs, probably akin to what I'd imagine those early Smiths gigs were like and things like that.
Mm,
But for me, it was like, because all my attention at that age as a young lad was what was happening in America, you know, what was coming out of Seattle and
okay.
such. And then all of a
Right.
sudden there was this really kind of sort of sexy and you know, just, I don't know, it just screamed Soho, and it seemed really
Yeah.
seedy and exciting. And he was the most incredible front man.
Yeah.
And I see them at Ali Pali maybe 2 years ago, maybe playing coming up, and nothing had changed. That excitement was still there, and if anything, he was on fucking fire more than he's
Yes.
ever been. It was absolutely incredible.
I think they went through a phase towards the end of their initial incarnation where he was and they were phoning it in a little bit and it all kind of fizzled out. But since the comeback, I mean, I don't know if there's any other band who have navigated the whole comeback scenario better than Suede. First of all, there was this amazing Teenage Cancer Trust gig at the Royal Albert Hall where in the middle of Metal Mickey, they just stopped the song and Brett just looked around the auditorium and this kind of slow ripple of applause just grew and grew to a roar. And he's just standing there, just beaming, just lapping it all up. And it was such a moment. And I just remember thinking, fucking hell, they really are back. This is something special. And their first comeback album, Bloodsports, was all right. It was solid. It was just basically them saying, we can still make a Suede record. But since then, they've made three absolutely brilliant records. Night Thoughts, The Blue Hour, and Autofiction. Um,
Outsiders, one of the best singles of the last few years.
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And live, I mean, he's the same age as me to within 4 days, Brett Anderson. Um, and every time I see them live, I think, how the fuck are you doing this? I asked him and he said he just goes running a lot, but he's just got this phenomenal energy. I remember going to see them at Hammersmith about, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago with my wife. And she turned to me and said, "Is he dying?" I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "It looks like the gig of somebody who might be dying and it's their last gig and they're just pouring it all out there on the stage." And that is what they're like. They're the most exciting live band and putting out the best, certainly the best records for an old band that I can think of. It's extraordinary.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Simon, tell me the first song you remember hearing that had an emotional impact on you, please.
Emotional. I suppose pop music, even when you're 8 or 9 years old, does something to your emotions. It sort of stirs things in you that you don't quite know what it means yet. Um, but I was an only child, and I was a very only child in that I was very introverted. I was shy. I spent a lot of time just locked in my bedroom reading books and all of that. Sort of. I had friends, but I wasn't Mr. Popular, let's say. And there was something about Dexy's Midnight Runners, because that's what I'm going to talk about. Here's another prop, Searching for the Young Soul Rebels.
Fantastic.
There was something about Dexy's Midnight Runners that really spoke to me as a loner, as an outsider. They seemed to be conveying something that made it possible for me to walk through the world on my own with my head held high. And to have this feeling that even if I am on my own, and even if nobody sees the world the way I do, nobody agrees with me, it doesn't matter. Only I need to know that I'm right. And that's something that Kevin Rowland seemed to convey. I know you've had him on the pod. I listened to it. And that was fantastic. He's one of my absolute all-time heroes, and Dexy's meant so much to me. I guess I was a bit of a latecomer. I loved Gino, and I really liked the singles. But then when 2IA came out, Come On Eileen, and all of that, I bought that album. Then I worked backwards and got Searching for the Young Soul Rebels belatedly. I went to see them. They were my first gig on my own, was going to see Dexys in Cardiff in 1982. And I just played those two albums to death, just back to back. And there's something about Tell Me When My Light Turns Green that really moves me. It's partly the melody and the horn section. There's something kind of really warm and inviting and friendly about the sound of it, but it's also got this kind of desperation to it that he's he's talking about having had manic depression, and starts seeing quite a bit in these 23 years. He was obviously a bit older than that, and he's shed a few tears and all that kind of stuff, and he's just sort of waiting for life to start. It's tell me when my light turns green. When does it all begin? When can life actually happen? And being a sort of teenager trapped in a small town, Barry in South Wales, in my bedroom, an only child, just thinking, how can life begin to happen? And yeah, I think that album in general and that song in particular really connected with me on an emotional level in a way that music hadn't before. There was stuff I loved. I loved two-tone. I loved quite a bit of synth pop. Prior to that, I loved disco. I loved ABBA and stuff like that. But there was something about Dexys that hit me on a level that no other band had, and that very few bands would any other time in my life. They're really extraordinary. Yeah, that's my answer to that question. Sorry, very long answer, but there we go.
No, that's a fantastic answer, and what an absolutely incredible band Dexys are, and I just love to champion Come On Eileen, because Soul Rebels is a fantastic record, and I love the cover of the Chuck Wood track.
Yeah,
I think it's an absolutely fantastic cover. I love the fact that on that they do the little breakdown in the middle, which they don't in the original. I love that. But Come On Eileen has kind of been adopted into kind of like wedding kind of dance floors now. But when you listen to that as a record, there's so many parts to it, and every single part of it is fucking amazing. And somehow they've stitched it all together where it all works perfectly to just create this absolute masterpiece. And I think it's easy to dismiss Come On Eileen as that, it's just, pissed up dads on the dance floor. But it's a masterpiece. It really is. I really believe it is, Simon.
I know one thing Kevin said to you was that it doesn't belong to him anymore. It belongs to everyone else. I get that. But yeah, it's a mad record. You're right. It slows down and it speeds up again, and it's got all these different phases to it. And it is a record that nobody could make now. Certainly nobody could have a hit with now. But I think for many years it was a bit of an albatross for Kevin. I think that quite a lot of the Dexys comeback gigs in the 2000s, he wouldn't play that song. It took him a while, and then he'd start playing a kind of Latin version of it to almost distance himself from it. Now, I saw them late last year. He completely plays it as you would expect to hear it, and I think he's decided, fuck it, I'm just going to own it now.
Yeah.
Which is lovely to see. But yeah, nobody should be ashamed of that record. And to this day, if I say I'm a Dexys fan, people go, huh, Come On Eileen. Yes, Come On Eileen. Fucking yes, absolutely right, Come On Eileen. I mean, there is more to them than that, but Exhibit A, Come On Eileen. Yeah, sure, let's talk about that. Great record.
Yeah. Absolutely. If that's your entry point to Dexys, well, you've got a good journey to go on there.
Yeah.
Simon, tell me the song that reminds you of your time at school, please.
So into my late teens now, when I was in the sixth form at Barry Boys Comprehensive, still a bit of a loner, but getting to the age where I had a small group of friends and we were sort of, I was a late developer in terms of like girlfriends or anything like that, but we were getting to the age where we were going to house parties and meeting girls and all of that. And everything's so heightened at that age. Your emotions and your sense of drama about everything, and heartbreak, and all this kind of business. And you pin massive hopes on something, and you've got no perspective at all. It's no use a grown up saying to you, "Oh, there's plenty more fish in the sea," or any of that kind of stuff. That does not fly when you're that age. It's it's all or nothing. So Prince really appealed to me because he was this bizarre kind of supremely talented, but this kind of this loner. Um, and Purple Rain, the film, and When Doves Cry, the song, were my introduction to him. And then, again, I went back and discovered all the old stuff. But I can remember exactly where I was, just walking along the street with a radio in Barry, and When Doves Cry coming on, and being almost rooted to the spot. Like, what is this unearthly record? It does sound like it comes from outer space. It's the trick, which it took me an embarrassingly long time to even notice, was there's no bass line. It doesn't have a bass line to it. So the music seems to sort of hang and float in the air. And there's all this mythology around Prince. I've read so many books about him, but the story tends to go that the film Purple Rain, which is obviously essentially a biopic in all but name, was done and dusted. It was good to go, but the producers got back to him and said, "Look, we've got this montage in the film, and we need some music to go with it. Can you do one more song?" And he turned that song around from nothing in 24 hours.
Fuck
And then
off, really?
and it became his first number one in first Billboard number one. And it's a song about this kind of doomed romance, and this dysfunctional relationship, and this fear of turning into your parents. It's the fear of repeating the sins of the ancestors, really. And I I don't think I'd even kissed a girl, or certainly not had a girlfriend by that point. So I don't know what the hell what I was projecting onto that song, or what I thought that song was saying to me. But just everything being so heightened as it is in that song. This sense that you're giving off such strong emotional vibrations that even animals can sense it. Animals strike curious poses. They feel the heat between me and you. The song goes. It's an incredible record, and it starts with that kind of. I mean, this is a song I could have chosen for a great intro.
Great intro.
That squall of Hendrix-like guitar at the start, before the beat kicks in, the drum machine, and yeah, it's. I don't know if you have this, but with your absolute favorite records, it's somewhere between I don't want to play them, or I can't play them, or I don't need to play them anymore. So you would think, this being my favorite record of all time, which it is, I'd be playing it every day. But no, it's sort of I allow myself to hear it very sparingly, because I can just play it in my brain. There's just a When Doves Cry switch right there, and off it goes. So yeah, I don't actually listen to it that much, and it's almost too emotional. If I'm in a club and the DJ, plays some Prince and it's that song, I almost can't dance to it. I've got to sort of like take a walk, get a breather or something. It's too much. So again, that could almost be the answer to the emotional connection thing. But we were quite a mixed bunch in the sixth form. There were lads who were into Queen and Dire Straits and Genesis and all that kind of stuff, and there was me and a couple of friends who were into kind of indie things like the Smiths and the Fall and the Bunnymen and whatever. But the one thing we all seemed to agree on was Prince. It's this common ground for everyone. So that we'd be fighting over the big ghetto blaster in the common room to put your tape on. But if somebody put a tape of Prince on, that's it. Everyone's fine with that. And when we all went out on a Friday or Saturday night to the local club, we might be hassling the DJ to play The Cult or The Cure or something like that. or which, according to which tribe that we belong to. But if he put Prince on, we were all on the floor, everybody, so yeah.
And without wanting to sound like indie wanker and start banging on about B-sides, but it was one of the first 7-inch records I ever owned was When Doves Cry.
17 days.
17 days.
Yes.
Fuck me, what a record.
Yeah. Well, he was too talented. He had too much. I mean, this is why he fell out with the record company. It was just pouring out of him, and he wanted to release double album after double album, and they weren't having it, But yeah, to me, he's, I don't believe in God. I'm completely atheist, but there's something uncanny about Prince. It's something not of this world about Prince. It is almost as if he is some kind of being from another realm, because I don't think anybody is anywhere near that talented. I think he's the greatest musical genius of my lifetime, certainly.
I mean, I mentioned that it was one of the first records I remembered buying from a record shop. So I'm going to ask you, Simon, now for track 4 to tell me the first song that you bought from a record shop, please.
Deep breath. Well, I got into trouble for this once. I was on Steve Lamac's show on Six Music, and he asked me this question, and I told him the truth. And the truth is, I'm the Leader of the Gang I Am by Gary Glitter. And Steve took a breath and said, "What was the second record you bought?"
Well, look, before we get on to your second record, let's talk about that a little bit, because I've done 550 of these episodes now, and so many people, Simon, have chosen Michael Jackson records, and I guess Michael Jackson's case has never been found guilty the way that obviously Gary Glitter has. But can there's so many artists that we can mention that have done bleak things that are still regarded and taken and put in such sort of high esteem. Can you separate the music from the artist?
I think everybody's mileage varies on this, and nobody is entirely consistent on it. I think everyone's familiar with the idea that bad people can make good art. But once you start examining people's line that they will not cross, it's more of a squiggle, almost always. So, for example, at Christmas, everyone will play Phil Spector music, and he literally murdered someone. And then in terms of sexual misdemeanors, certain rock legends get a free pass and other trashy pop stars do not. I'm not an apologist for Paul Gadd, the human being, who's obviously a convicted paedophile and a terrible human being. All I can tell you is that when I was 5 years old, I was in a record shop with my dad. My dad was a massive music freak. He was a rock and roller in the 50s and a hippie in the 60s. And in the 70s, he even got involved in punk, even though he was too old for it. And he had a massive record collection. He was always dragging me around record shops. I was bored out of my mind, and he could see how bored I was. And he just said to me, "Do you want a record?" I said, "Yes, please." And he said, "What do you want?" I said, "Leader of the Gang" by Gary Glitter. Because, it was just, I think in the 70s, celebrities that I'd heard of had this sort of superhero quality to them. You had Elvis Presley was by this point wearing jumpsuits and doing kung fu moves on stage. You had Evel Knievel in a fucking motorbike that's converted into some kind of rocket leaping across the Grand Canyon and all this kind of stuff. And then you had Gary Glitter, who had those massive kind of Baco foil shoulder pads and a giant wig, which I didn't realize was a wig, and these stack heel boots. And he's got 2 drummers in his band, the Glitter Band, with this massive tribal terrace chant and this sort of stomping beat going on, and this overinflated ego. I'm the leader, I'm the greatest. Come on, and all of that. And yeah, I just think if you can separate it from Paul Gadd, the criminal, it is objectively a fucking phenomenal record. I haven't listened to it in a long time because it's just so distasteful. You can't wipe that taste away. Maybe some people can, I could actually, not that long ago, just a few years ago, I was fine with listening to it, but sometimes you just hit your limit. And I mentioned the Smiths earlier. The Smiths are, to me, the greatest rock and roll band of all time. But because of what Morrissey has become, I find them very difficult to listen to. I have to basically be pissed in order to listen to the Smiths, even though nothing about those records has changed. Those records are still as great as they always were. But in order to obliterate the bad associations, I need to be in some kind of altered state. But anyway,
it's not been easy for us Smiths fans lately, has it? It really
No.
hasn't. Oh God, I thank the Lord for Johnny Marr.
Yeah,
he seems to be doing all right.
One of life's good guys, Johnny Marr. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, I mentioned before we pressed record that I had sort of had conversations with you many years ago in the mid-90s in a nightclub. So I'm going to ask you now, Simon, to tell me the song that soundtracked your years clubbing, please.
Right. Well, this is a song that I was thinking about this. Which era of clubbing do I talk about? Because I've been going to clubs since the 80s. I've been running clubs since the 80s. And which era do I pick on? And I just suddenly thought of a song that has basically followed me through all those eras. And well, it's on 2 albums, and this is one of them, Non-Stop Ecstatic Dancing by Soft Cell. And of course, that's a remix album featuring some tracks which were originally on Non-Stop Erotic Cabaret.
What great names for albums.
Yes, yeah. And the song is Sex Dwarf. I don't know if you know it, but
I know it very well.
Yeah, right. Okay. So Soft Cell were the first British people, supposedly, to take ecstasy when they were on a trip to New York. And I think that kind of found its way into their music, because they weren't just a sort of plinky plonky synth pop group. They had this really hard edge of dance, like electronic dance, to what they were about. And Sex Dwarf is just an absolute banger of a tune. But where I first encountered it, because I didn't have the album at the time, when I moved to London in '86, I started going to goth clubs. And clubs like the Kit Kat on Leicester Square, which is run by a brilliant DJ called Simon Hobart. And also at the Electric Ballroom on a Friday night, there's a DJ called Bell who used to just play goth stuff. And Sex Dwarf was obviously, Soft Cell weren't a goth band, but they had a kind of dark gothic edge to them. And this track was huge on the goth scene. It's the refrain, isn't it nice, sugar and spice, luring disco dollies to a life of vice, really chimed with the goth crowd. And there's the whole S&M thing, I would like you on a long black lead. And yeah, it's this sort of perverted S&M dance track, and it's just so naggingly memorable. It really sticks in your brain. And then into the 90s, when I was I was involved in the Romo scene, which, for people who don't know, was kind of it was a scene which was trying to recapture the spirit of the new romantics of the early 80s at a time in the 90s when that stuff couldn't be less fashionable. And it was a kind of reaction against the blokiness of lad rock and Britpop at the time. And it was a pro-glamour movement in a time of anti-glamour. And I was heavily involved in it. And I co-ran a club called Arcadia, and I used to DJ at a club called Club Skinny in Camden. And Sex Dwarf was a track that seemed right for that, and it came with me from the early 80s through the goth scene to the Romo scene. And then in the 2000s, I launched a club night called Stay Beautiful, which was a kind of glam punk dress up night, again quite kind of similar in some ways to the Romo scene, but a lot more successful. We had a whole little subculture around us in Camden Town once a month. And our subtitle on the flyers was Luring Disco Dollies to a Life of Vice, and that song Sex Dwarf kind of became our national anthem. And I've been lucky enough to interview Mark Almond many times, and Dave Ball, and I've worked with Soft Cell. I did the booklet for their Keychains and Snowstorms box set, and I absolutely love them. I just think, particularly the first album that this song comes from, is immaculate as a debut album. It's not often, you get great debut albums, but usually they drop the ball a couple of times. Not if you pardon the pun, but not this one. It's just every song is perfect, I think, and Sex Dwarf really stands out. And for people who've only heard Tainted Love or whatever, it's quite a bracing listen.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's glorious. Yeah,
it's so weird that you mentioned that. I've run an alternative club for over 30 years now, and
yeah.
And when I first started going there as a clubber on the Goff night on a Friday, was the first time I ever heard Bedsitter, and I was like, why are they playing Soft Cell at a golf club? And since working there, I've sort of, my club before it was called what it's called now used to be called Crocs Glamour Club, funnily enough, Crocs Glamour Club. And in Mark Allman's book, he talks about coming to Essex and playing Crocs and getting.
This is the club that had an actual crocodile in a tank.
Correct.
Yeah. I've seen some footage of Danny Baker going
That's
there
right.
to report on some. Yeah.
Depeche Mode were obviously the residents because they were our local boys. But yeah. It's called the Pink Toothbrush now, and has been for, well, next weekend it's our 40th anniversary.
Rayleigh, the Pink Toothbrush. Yeah,
correct.
I always remember that name from the gig listings. Yeah,
it was it was in that early 90s gig listing. It was on the rounds then doing it. But yeah, it was quite interesting speaking, like seeing that interview with Mark Allman saying he got bottled off stage the first time he came to Essex. But did you go to the last, what was meant to have been the last gig at the O2?
That was a little bit naughty of them, wasn't it? Yes, I did. In fact, the gig program was basically my booklet from the box set. They just reprinted
wow.
it. Yeah. It was great. It felt like a real tribal gathering, didn't it? Just everybody coming out of the woodwork. People hadn't seen each other for years, turning up to that gig, and then they were a little bit naughty and carried on doing gigs a couple of years later, and they're still going now. But you can't blame them. They were having too much fun, and yeah.
That I mean, I've been watching it on YouTube today, but that live version there of Say Hello, Wave Goodbye is pretty fucking spectacular.
Well, Say Hello, Wave Goodbye is the song with which I always end my current club night, which is Spellbound down in Brighton. I run an alternative 80s night down here, and obviously we play loads of Soft Cell, loads, including Sex Dwarf most months. But yeah, Say Hello, Wave Goodbye every night. It's the obvious ending, like goodbye.
I love that
last bit. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to take you home for track 6 and ask you to tell me a favourite song from an artist from your home county, please.
My home county doesn't actually exist anymore because it's all the boundaries have changed and all that kind of stuff. But I was born in Cardiff and grew up in Barry, and in those days, Cardiff and Barry were the two parts of the county of South Glamorgan. Now it's all broken up into tiny little administrative divisions. But I'm going to cheat slightly by picking a Cardiff band who are actually from all over Wales, Super Furry Animals, but they're a Cardiff-based band. And people always expect me to say that the Manic Street Preachers are the greatest Welsh band, but do you know what? I don't know. I think it might be the Super Furries. I think even the Manics might think that the Super Furries are the greatest. It took me a while to get them. I remember when they first started getting written about in the press, they were portrayed as being this kind of cagoule wearing lad rock band who just took loads of acid, and that was their thing. They were just sort of like these druggy piss artist blokes, and that turned me right off. But whoever wrote that stuff was doing them a huge disservice. And it was only on the second album, really, Radiator, that something clicked for me. I can remember standing in the middle of the field at the Reading Festival and them doing Demons.
Oh, what a record.
And just, something about Griff Rhys's voice. I mean, we talk about emotional connections. there's something about it that just hits me with a certain vibration that um, it melts my heart. It really does. And I would say that second only to Smokey Robinson. He's my he's my second favorite male singer. Let's say that Griff Rhys. And there is this kind of a lot of their music is quite, I don't want to say wacky, but it is quite comedic and fun. Um, but then a lot of it is very melancholy and very elegiac, and that's certainly true of the song I've chosen, which I can't wave the vinyl around because I don't have it. But Ice Hockey Hair, which was from an EP they put out in the late '90s. I think it's late '90s, and it's whatever it's trying to say. It's a little bit off center. You can't quite figure it out. It seems to be a guy who is convinced that his relationship is about to end, because the chorus goes, "Tell me what to do if it all falls through. Can you point me a direction I can take my shoes?" Which I think is a lovely line. And the chorus has got this kind of space boogie feel to it. And normally anything in a boogie tempo is feel good and it's, jolly and all of that. But it's kind of really heartbreaking that this guy can see the end of a relationship coming, and he's just, what now? Where do I go now? But then it's got all these lines in the verses that throw you off the scent. Table tennis rules, they're so confusing. It's not played by fools. Like, what? And even the title, Ice Hockey Hair, it's I believe a North American term for a mullet. What we call a mullet hairstyle, ice hockey hair.
Oh, is that right? I never knew
Yeah,
that.
yeah. It's another word for mullet. So is he the guy with the mullet, or is the woman he's singing it to the one with the mullet, or is it nothing to do with you never quite know with them, but it's just got this feel to it. And even the recurring guitar motif in it, it's this kind of soaring but yearning, heartbreaking little guitar motif. It reminds me a bit of do you know the song "I'm Mandy, Fly Me" by 10cc?
Mm.
It's got that same sort of feel to it. And I it in a way it could have been any Super Furry Animal song, but I just think that happens to be my favorite. I just think they're such an underrated band. People don't talk about them enough, because I suppose they had the misfortune to come along at the tail end of Britpop and maybe get lumped in with that, or they got lumped in with the Welsh version, which was Cool Cymru. But they deserve to be taken on their own merits and stand alone from all that. I just think that they're extraordinary. And yeah, I love them dearly. Super Furry Animals. There we go.
I honestly think, like, if you look at the greatest hits by the Super Furry Animals as your entry point, there is not a duff track on there. As a singles band, they were absolutely faultless.
They were, and they were so adept at pastiching different genres. So, some of their stuff might sound like the Electric Light Orchestra, like Drawing Rings Around the World, or some of it might sound like Barry White, like juxtaposed with you, or that they could do sort of Latin stuff like Northern Lights, or punk rock stuff like God Show Me Magic. They could do anything. They could
And
do
then
anything.
break your heart with Fire in My Heart.
Yeah, exactly. This sort of stripped down folk ballads, and oh, what a band.
And whoever wrote that they were lads, I mean, he's one of the gentlest souls I think I've ever
He's
spoke
so gentle.
to.
He's so lovely. He talks so softly and slowly as well. And I've interviewed him a few times, and I remember the first couple of times thinking, there are a number of reasons why he might be talking so slowly. He could just be somebody who really likes to think and ponder the question before answering. It could be all the weed. I remember one time somebody slapped down, one of their management slapped down a bag of weed the size of a pillow on the table in the middle of an interview. And I thought, is it the fact that English isn't even his first language? So is he kind of translating in his mind what his thoughts are before saying them? But yeah, he's so lovely and so gentle. I remember being over in France in 2016 to follow the Welsh football team in the Euros, and the first game was is in Bordeaux. We were against Slovakia, and incredibly, thanks to Gareth Bale, we beat them 2-1. And I never thought I would see Wales in a football tournament, never mind see us win a game. We ended up going all the way to the semi-final. But I just remember walking from the stadium back to the centre of Bordeaux, and a tram went past, and Griff Rhys was in the tram, and he saw me through the glass, and he just looked up and waved at me. And I just had this lovely feeling that, oh, Griff is here, everything's going to be fine. And it just sort of really settled me, you know. He has that kind of calming thing about him.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, Simon. Well, look, it's your last track,
Yeah.
and as a DJ, you're probably no stranger to being a tastemaker, and this is your opportunity to do that to the listeners of this podcast. So, can I ask you to tell me a song that you think many people may not know that you would like them to hear, please?
I thought about this, you know, and originally I thought about going down the Northern Soul route because I love Northern Soul, and the whole point of Northern Soul is obscurity, really. But I thought that's just going to trip me up, because if I pick something that to me is this really rare record, there'll be somebody listening to this who'll just, oh God, everyone knows that one. You know? So I ditched that. But I am kind of fascinated with flop music, with stuff that was punted out there by major labels, and seemed to have every chance of being a hit, but somehow stalled just outside the top 40. And I think the 80s were a particularly rich time for this. And I put together a Spotify playlist of all the songs which to me fall into that category, called Big Bubbles, No Troubles, named after
Ellis Beggs and Howard.
Ellis Beggs and Howard. You know. Yeah, and it's got all stuff on there like Muck It Out by the Farmers Boys, which is another absolute banger. And and of course, by the very nature of choosing these songs that were flops, you know, when you look at a Spotify playlist and half the tracks are grayed out, that's how it is, because they're not even on Spotify. They're not on Spotify. So this song, the one I've chosen, it's Steamhammer Sam by Interferon. And they were this duo who used to get played quite a lot in the evenings on Radio 1. You know, you'd hear them on, I don't know, Janice Long, Richard Skinner, Annie Nightingale, as kind of evening shows. Not Peel, because, you know, Peel played indie label stuff, but Interferon, I think, were on London. They were certainly on a major. Their first track was a kind of 80s take on Bob Dylan's Subterranean Homesick Blues called Get Out of London. Just a very sort of high-paced, almost sort of listicle lyric, you know, just spewing out all the words. Steamhammer Sam was the second single, and it's almost got this kind of fairground, circusy kind of barrel organ feel to the music. It's very old-timey, and it's about the dignity of labor. It's about a guy who is old now, but had previously worked in a factory on a machine, steam hammer, and he's lost his job, whether he's, you know, retired or been made redundant or been fired, and he's lost his mind, and he ends up in the slammer, whether they mean prison or just, you know, the loony bin, as they would have said back then. It's I think in some ways it was timely, because lots of people were being made redundant from heavy industry in the time of Thatcher. But it's a really peculiar record, and it, towards the end, it's got this children's choir who come in, and that bit reminds me a lot of, do you know the track Excerpt from a Teenage Opera by Keith West? Mm-hmm. The 60s track, Grocer Jack, all that stuff. But the children in this song are singing this sort of really earwormy, this really hooky na 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 refrain, and it's a bit like T-Rex Hot Love, that, you know, like half of Hot Love by T-Rex, just na 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 na. It's basically like that, and you just hear it and you think, how was this not a massive hit? But it wasn't. if ever I meet somebody who knows Steamhammer Sam by Interferon, I think, right, friend for life. Friend for life. Because yeah, it's one of those ones that if you happen to catch it on the radio back then and it stuck with you, it really stuck with you, you know. So yeah, I'm sort of righting a wrong. I'm overturning a great injustice by naming this record. So if people look it up, it's not on Spotify, but it's Interferon, Interaferon, Steamhammer Sam. There we go.
Fantastic. And if they can't find that, they can get stuck into other things that never bothered the charts on Big Bubbles, No Troubles.
Big Bubbles, No Troubles, which is basically a grey list with hardly any actual tracks on it. Yeah, I'm Simon_Price01, I think, on Spotify. That's what I am on most internet things anyway.
Oh, fantastic. So we should actually, before we wrap this, talk about what you've been up to. What's been happening writing wise? What can people go and get stuck into if they've enjoyed this? What can they go and read? What do you recommend?
Oh, my latest thing is a book on the Cure, which came out just before Christmas, called Curepedia, an A to Z of the Cure, which is this huge telephone directory sized thing. It's basically the band's entire career in alphabetical format, which allowed me to really go off on one in a way that I might not be able to if it was a standard biography. So, you know, for example, I've written 2,000 words on the way that Robert Smith uses cuteness in his persona, and you can't write about that stuff in a normal biog. So yeah, I had a lot of fun doing that, and it's had a really good reaction from people. So yeah, if you're a Cure fan, that's out there. And yeah, I'm still writing. I'm still, you know, freelancing for whoever will have me. I'm on the Chart Music podcast. If I'm allowed to advertise a rival podcast,
it's not a rival. It's one of my favorite podcasts.
Okay, yeah, Chart Music. It's this guy called Al Needham from Nottingham set it up and hired a bunch of us ex-Melody Maker writers to just talk about old episodes of Top of the Pops, and I've had loads of fun doing that for the last 5 or 6 years. So yeah, that keeps me busy. And if people want to follow my antics, I'm Simon_Price01 on social media. So there you go.
Absolutely. I've never heard people go in on Candy Flip the way that you did on that podcast.
Yeah. We can be quite brutal. Yeah.
Fantastic. Oh, Simon, I've had such a lovely time talking to you, mate. Thank you so much for coming on, mate. It's been absolutely wonderful. Thank you.
Cheers. Hopefully see you in real life soon. Yeah.
Absolutely. Cheers. I'm going to press stop. Don't go anywhere.